Good morning, Francis.
Good morning.
One of the great joys of the direct path is that it has no structure. One of the great difficulties with the direct path is that it has no structure. I'm wondering if you might supply some general purpose guidelines for how one might add some structure or how one could learn oneself how much structure is efficacious.
We should try first to have a definition of the direct path versus the progressive path. And the analogy I use is one of a plane landing in an airport. And the plane is going to be guided by the air traffic controller and by the airport controller through a meandering path up until at some point, sooner or later, it lines up with the runway and enters the final phase of the landing procedure. The meandering varies from airport to airport, and even in a given airport varies depending on the conditions. However, there is something that never changes, which is that at the end, the plane has to line up with the landing strip. So in this metaphor, the direct path is represented by the final approach. The meandering phase that comes before is of various length and duration. Corresponds to the variety, infinite variety, we could say, of progressive path. Also, this metaphor is quite representative in that of the transition between the direct path and between the progressive path and the direct path, in that this transition can take place long before the landing, the actually touching of the wheels, or a short time before the landing of the wheels. Fighter jets typically will just have a last, take the last corner, the last turn, and then almost right away touch. A big airplane landing in an isolated airport can line up miles and miles before the touching of the wheels. So it's the same here. Some students have traveled for a long time on the progressive path, and all of a sudden takes the direct path and land into their true nature almost immediately. Others progress on the direct path almost from the beginning and end up landing at the same spot. It depends on the specifics of the students. All teachers, even the so-called direct path teachers, teach some form of progressive path. For instance, in the current situation right now, the interaction of questions and answers is not the direct path. It is progressive. It is a technique, if you will. It is, the question is asked, the answer points at the living answer, which is experience, which has to be experienced, which is the touching of the wheels, if you will, on the runway. They may or they may not touch, right? These wheels. Sometimes the pilot decides to not to land and to reaccelerate and go for another trip around the airport. The other progressive path includes the so-called meditation session, in which the access to the experience of our true nature is accomplished not solely starting from thoughts, but also starting from bodily sensations and sense perceptions in an appropriate manner. It could be said, however, that if we keep using the same metaphor, that these two methods or these two techniques correspond to a meandering which is very close to the short final, if you will. In other words, it is not an approach which is taken from a long distance of the direct path. Distant approaches are, for instance, the religious approach or some form of yoga. These are the more distant approaches in which usually the students travels for a long time on the progressive path, because before he or she meets the teaching of the direct path. Nothing happens by chance, however, and once a student meets the teaching of the direct path, it means that he or she was meant to be there, and therefore they usually stay there if their intention or desire for liberation was pure, was genuine. So, answering your questions, I think I've shown to you that there is already some kind of structure in the so-called direct path approach, which is not as direct as it is alleged to be.
Thank you, Francis. That's very helpful.
Not quite as comfortable asking you this now that you're sitting on your throne, but it has to do with, well, partly with teachers and
About what?
with teachers, but first the question is about what's called establishment or letting go, dissolving of residues, vasanas, whatever you want to call it. That's a matter of degree, right?
Yeah.
Establishment is a matter of degree. The after landing process, so to speak.
of degree, but let's use another metaphor. Let's say you have a headache and you take aspirin or Advil, right? And 2 hours later, you notice the headache is gone, fully gone. So you can say it's not a matter of degree, right? The headache is gone. But you cannot pinpoint in hindsight the moment when it disappeared. It's the same with the liberation process. At some point along the path, the traveling companion called misery has left us unnoticed. Only later do we notice that he has left.
Sure, that's been my experience where I notice that, wow, things are more harmonious, happier, spontaneous, loving, whatever. Um, and perhaps this is just the mind, but it does seem like a matter of degree. I don't feel like.
It's not, there is something which is not a matter of degree, which is the fear, the existential fear. That's not a matter of degree. A glimpse of our true nature liberates us from this from the root of all fears. It doesn't mean that all fears and desires instantaneously disappear the moment the plant has been uprooted. The plant stays alive for a little while after having been uprooted, up until, due to the lack of water and nutrients, all the leaves die and the plant finally dies. So it is the same thing with the structure of fears. For instance, fear of elevator, fear of being sick, of getting sick, fear of not being loved, fear of being abandoned, fear of not being recognized, fear of not finding a partner, fear, whatever fear, right? These fears in this metaphor are represented by the leaves of the plant. The root is the answer to the question, what am I really? What is my reality? And the glimpse of my reality as being utterly independent from anything perceived. So that is the root. In the beginning, the leaves being still green and looking and healthy looking gives the impression, the false impression that nothing has changed, that the plant is still alive and doing fine. So apparently nothing gets noticed, you see? But this uprooting takes place in one single shot.
Yeah, so it's kind of a natural process that doesn't require specific work on individual fears because the root assumption has been.
Well, if we keep this metaphor going, if before uprooting the plant, or let's say the tree, before uprooting the tree, you try to remove the leaves one by one, it's a very tough task. You have to climb on the tree if the tree is huge, right? And there are many leaves. And when you have removed the last leaves, already thousands of new leaves have reappeared on the tree. Therefore, it's a waste of time and energy to do it that way. However, once you have uprooted the tree or severed the trunk, if the goal is to get rid of the leaves, then you can, why not, take them away one by one. It will accelerate the process whereby eventually all leaves are going to die and fall away by themselves.
I see. It's not necessary, but can't hurt and could help.
Yeah, so because it's simply a way to cooperate. There is nobody cooperating. It's a way to cooperate with the universal flow. There is a Sanskrit text in which the various categories of Jivan Muktas are described. It's called the Tripura Rasya. And Jivan Mukta means liberated ones. In other words, it kind of establishes a categorization of the different ways liberation seems to manifest. And some yogins, upon having a glimpse of truth, are immediately established in their true nature. It would be analogous, if you will, to a tree in which the work of getting rid of the leaves has been completed. And then the trunk is severed. Then no leaf is going to grow. It's not quite true, but another case is one in which upon a liberating glimpse, nothing is done. Eventually, some leaves, if you will, fall away by themselves, but many fears and desires can still be present when the body goes away. So the fruit of liberation is not really enjoyed. The celebration aspect of this is not fully enjoyed, although it is enjoyed to some extent. It's not fully enjoyed during this life of the body. And between these two extreme cases, the most usual case is one whereby there is the liberating glimpse, followed by a sadhana, which is a period of yoga, but after the glimpse, which corresponds to the metaphor in which, after having cut the trunk of the tree, we then get rid of the most important part of the foliage.
Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you. The related question, which is kind of answered, is that there's often seen as some beings are enlightened, as if people can become enlightened, but it's really more, you could say, enlightenment itself unpeoples itself, kind of turning it around.
Absolutely.
The related question was, what is it that's letting go of the vasanas? You know, there's no separate entity to do that. So where is it? Where, where are the habits? It's just in consciousness.
It is consciousness. It is consciousness all the way. It is consciousness who chooses ignorance. It is consciousness who unchooses ignorance.
Okay, so the illusion of the person is
A choice of awareness.
yes.
Yes.
Essentially seen through, but then still, in some cases, leaves are still left over to liberate oneself from. I mean, it's paradoxical from the mind, obviously, but
It's not really paradoxical. The paradox only arises if, first, the paradox is an intellectual paradox, and the paradox arises at the intellectual level only if there is some confusion between the relative level and the absolute level.
yeah, that's why I define a paradox as an apparent contradiction. So it's only, as you say, to the intellect that it seems like a contradiction, but it's really not.
No, but this apparent intellectual contradiction can be lifted, can be eliminated through discrimination. Discrimination is a process whereby a distinction is established between the absolute level of reality and the relative level of the manifestation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's essential, critical. Occasionally I've had conversations where I'm talking about, casually talking about Francis and, you know, something to do. It could even be as innocent as, oh, look at the new glasses, and we're going along, and suddenly they'll react and say, "Oh, I'm not interested in that. I don't see Francis as human," or Francis, what you're talking as if Francis is human. And to me, that's that confusion of relative. I mean, we all are appearing in consciousness. So at the absolute level, if you're talking at the relative level, then we're all humans. So it seems to me that's that confusion you're talking about, or the lack of discrimination.
But when we say we are all human, what is meant is simply that human bodies are human. That's all that is meant.
That we're all,
which is a kind of a trivial thing to say, right?
yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at it as appearance.
Dogs' bodies are doggish. Human bodies are human. It's a tautology. But when we say we are human, that's not true. We are not human. You know?
I mean, as a whole. as a,
Whatever it is that we are is not human.
agreed. So I suppose it depends on whether you have kind of an idealist or a realist look. What if
No, it's not dependent on.
in terms of how you talk about it, if you say we're all just appearances in consciousness, that's kind of the idealist point of view.
No, I would never say we are just appearances. I never say that.
I know you
You
don't.
say that. We are that to which the appearances appear.
Right.
Then it can be said that whatever appears is ultimately made out of that, of the reality to which it appears.
Okay, that's a more clear.
But the reality to which it appears is not made of that which appears. It's not a two-way street. If you want metaphor, the waves are made of water, but the water is not made of waves.
Yeah, that's a good one because the waves, even if you look at the particles in a wave, they're just moving in circles. They're not going anywhere. Yeah, it's very simple.
There is ultimately not a problem in being able to talk as the rest of mankind talks, so that we can communicate. Because we understand that most people believe to be human bodies. So with someone who believes to be a human body, we have to interact with them on that level. As I say, if a cop stops you for speeding, right? You are not going to tell him I'm not human, therefore I cannot speed.
Sure, sure.
You may spend your weekend in the wrong places. Yeah.
I don't have any problem with, talking with the so-called ignorant. I don't even like that word because it sounds kind of judgmental, but like talking with my landlord, and it's fun. It's charming. I see that he's, he kind of like is identified and he wants approval and all that stuff, but it doesn't matter. It's
But
fun.
it becomes different when we talk about the truth. Then when we talk about the truth, and if we say something like, we are human, then then Houston, we've got a problem.
Well, it's when I'm talking with truth lovers, and I feel this kind of affinity, and then they say something like this, and I react, and then I have to I'm taken aback a little. It takes me a little time to kind of see what's going on, but I think sometimes maybe it's sort of a bhakti, a devotional attitude, how they see the teacher. That's
No,
kind
I
of,
think it's just the opposite, because if you are the one, as you said, who sees Francis as human, it means you see yourself as human. Because we see others the way we see ourselves.
well, it's as if they're seeing Francis as different fundamentally in nature from other humans.
That's a different story. That's a completely different story. But if you see the teacher as human, or for that matter, anybody else as human, fundamentally, then it's an ignorant view.
Yeah, I understand.
You see, it's very important, because there is often in the, I hope not here, but among truth seekers around the teacher, this misunderstanding according to which the teacher is different from me. Of course, if I believe the teacher is different from me, I am in ignorance, right? It's so obvious. I remember, and of course, there is lingering ignorance among some students of the teacher. I remember talking to a friend around my teacher and saying something that was true, and that was, in addition to that, was truly my experience. And this friend told me, you will be able to say that when you get realized. You know? And then at that moment, I felt, that he was establishing these distinctions between the teacher and the students cannot possibly be realized. Otherwise, he wouldn't be around this teacher, you see? And at the same time, because he was a truth lover, he felt the truth of what I was saying. And at the same time, there was something in him that was resisting against that. You see? Whereas, and there are teachers who kind of, by their attitude, maintain this difference. For instance, not to name it, when I've watched a few videos of Osho, and Osho is a very smart, very intelligent teacher, and fulfilling his role and his mission. But at the same time, there was this impression that he gave that he was a teacher and everybody else was not realized. In other words, he was like me, sitting above the fray, right? Above the vulgus pecus, the vulgum pecum, and of course, that's at some point, this distance between the teacher and the student has to vanish. And it is part of the integrity of the teacher to help in the vanishing of this distance, not in maintaining it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was part of, I suppose, my concern. You're very careful to make that, to be clear about that. And so I was surprised to hear this, because I've had an interest in cults over the years, just fascinating, like, psychological phenomenon. And one of the things is, as you say, they don't make that distinction clear, the basic discrimination. They take advantage of it, maybe, or maybe they have, residues of ignorance themselves, such that they maintain that illusion that they're different. But anyway, so I greatly respect that you say, you sometimes talk about, to someone who is talking like that, you'll say, look, I make the same mistakes as everyone else. I get traffic tickets, I get colds or whatever.
Yeah, in fact, what we respect in the teacher is the self in the teacher. In that sense, talking about the various progressive paths. I have mentioned two progressive paths, but a third progressive, I mean, the path of pure Vedanta through the philosophical initiative or dialogue, a la Socrates, if you will, the path of the yogin through the body and the sensations and the perceptions, but there is also the path of bhakti. And among the various aspects of the path of bhakti is the respect for the teacher. So the teacher is seen in the beginning from the vantage point as a person. But at the same time, there is something magical because, or sacred, if you will, the student who is open to this type of path has then the revelation of the divine element in the teacher. And the divine element in the teacher resonates with the divine element in him or in her. And so this privileged relationship he has with the teacher then gradually will get established with other truth lovers and eventually with all beings. So it's part of the progressive path. The teacher then is used as a tool in which first he appears according to the belief system, to the ignorant belief system of the student as another being, but albeit as a being with special qualities or special powers, only to discover later on that the teacher was not different from him. So that's why a teacher welcomes all beings that are seeking truth, that come in contact with him or her. The only thing that a teacher appreciates in a truth seeker is the level of intensity for their search of the truth. That's the only thing that really establishes a difference among various truth seekers, and that's the only thing that reveals their level of maturity.
Thank you for that explication. There's one remaining question that has been kind of bothering me for a long time, and I mean, it's not a big concern, but I've heard this, Rupert, for example, recounting meeting his teacher and having this experience of knowing this is my teacher. Or I think you related something similar about Jean Klein, where you knew it was your teacher, and I've never had that this is my teacher experience. It's been more kind of impersonal, or I mean, it was like a new chapter in my life coming here, but I didn't have that this is my teacher experience. And maybe it's because I've kind of always seen it more about questions that that I'm possessed by, or that I want answers to. Even when I was studying philosophy, and even after school, and people find out that I studied philosophy, they say, "What is your favorite philosopher?" And I was taken aback because I didn't think of it that way. Whoever seemed to have answers to questions is who I was interested in. So see it in more of a general light. But I guess that doesn't matter that I've never had the my teacher experience. That's more perhaps, as you were saying, from that outlook of seeing others as humans and getting something.
You see, again, your question
The teacher's revealed on the path.
makes a confusion between the real teacher and the public address system through which the teacher speaks. The human body mind is a public address system. The same universal teacher may use different public address systems.
Exactly. I mean, that's how I see it now. So is it people that recount meeting my teacher just haven't seen that?
I wasn't finished.
I'm sorry.
However, what I call the recognition of the teacher is something that may happen through a specific public address system. At the same time, when this recognition happens, we know that the teacher is not the public address system. And we know that there is not a speck of difference between the teacher and us. So it's a peculiar type of experience in which we are the teacher and the teacher is us. So then we are free from any form of teacher. However, it may be that for us, a certain public address system is more clear than another. Different speakers have different bandwidths, different volumes, different qualities. So we may prefer one stereo system over another.
Right. Yeah, that's perfectly clear. Thank you.